The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more.
I mean, to put it a little different way, until Nevados came along, an American football field with a 1-foot rise in the middle to handle rainwater runoff was a problem that had to be accounted for with conventional trackers by using variable post-reveal height.
Yeah.
You know, that thing that looks so flat, it was a problem for conventional equipment. We came along and we changed that.
Are you speeding the energy transition? Here at the Clean Power Hour, our hosts Tim Montague and John Weaver bring you the best in solar, batteries, and clean technologies every week. Want to go deeper into decarbonization? We do too. We're here to help you understand and command the commercial, residential, and utility solar, wind, and storage industries. So let's get to it. Together we can speed the energy transition.
Today on the Clean Power Hour, terrain tracking trackers. I'm Tim Montague. Welcome to the Clean Power Hour. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify, and please tell a friend about the show. My guest today is Yezin Taha. He is the founder of Nevados Solar. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
I just love talking to you, Yezin. I don't know what it is about you. You and I have some common or things in common, but I am a geek for racking. I love talking about racking. I don't know what it is about racking. It's not the sexiest part of a solar array necessarily, but it's extremely important, obviously. And a statistic that my listeners really want to know is that 94% of utility solar is now built with solar trackers, single-axis trackers. And this happened over a period of only like 6 or 7 years when the industry basically went from fixed tilt to tracker. You get more energy as you're tracking the sun. 10 to 15% is the statistic I use. Some companies use a higher statistic. I think we have to be very careful about that. But anyway, Yezin, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. How did you get interested in solar, and why did you start Nevados?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Tim. You just introduced me to the 94% number today. That's the first I'd heard that. I haven't looked at that number for a little while, but we were talking 70, 80% a handful of years ago. And now we're at 94% of utility scale projects using trackers. That's incredible. Really shows the growth of the industry. Well, how did I get into solar tracking? I'll sum it up. One quick sentence here. I crushed my leg in 2009 and almost lost it. And that's how I ended up creating the first all-terrain solar tracker in the world. And I can go into a little more detail if you're interested.
What happened to your leg?
It was a freak accident skiing. I was in Jackson Hole and going down Tower Chute 3, it was a weird day. It thawed the day before and then refroze overnight. So the snow was about as hard as this table I'm sitting in front of here. Got half an inch of mashed potato powder on top. Going down, flat light, couldn't see. Something pulled my left ski off. Don't know what it was, still don't know. Went to fall down, I got caught in the downhill, the slope, and the uphill of the mogul, and that was it. It just destroyed my ankle. So I was out of work for about a year and a half. It took a long time to be able to recover from that. But I can dig into that in a little bit. I'll start with the beginning of my career, though, if you wouldn't mind.
But so that time off during your recovery was a time when you incubated the idea for Nevados?
No. During that time, I learned how to fend for myself. I'd always worked for large companies. I came out of college and I worked at GE. And then I went over to a large organization called Black & Veatch. No, sorry, not Black & Veatch, Train Commercial Air Conditioning. From there, I went to another pretty large organization, ended up at Black & Veatch. Black & Veatch was after I had my accident. But through that all, I didn't learn truly how to operate a business on my own. I was a small cog in a large organization. So during that time off, I I learned to fend for myself. And I had this goal of starting my own business. I'd tried it a few times. I didn't really know what I was doing. And but I became an expert on the solar industry when I came back to work at Black and Veatch. And then I finally had the drive and the comfort to operate on my own, and then the skill and experience with the solar industry. And that's what let me really break out to start Nevados.
And presumably, though, the work you were doing at Black and Veatch is somehow related to the solar industry, right?
It was. I started my career designing gas turbines at GE. So I spent a little over 5 years doing that. Very deep technical work. After that, I moved into trained commercial air conditioning. It was commercial HVAC equipment, controls, and software. That's where I really started to put together all these different pieces, like understanding the heavy equipment, the control systems to operate it, and then the critical role that software played on making all of that equipment operate seamlessly. So that was my first real experience or intro to putting all of those pieces together. From there, I went to another company that didn't last very long. They got shut down in the financial crisis, and 6 days after they shut down and I lost that job, I crushed my ankle and I had a year and a half to ruminate on things. So I came back, I took this role with Black and Veatch, and I started doing bankability studies on single axis trackers. The first one I did was on Array Technologies.
Okay.
The last one I did was on Nextracker.
Gotcha.
And I saw all the other major trackers in the world at that time, flew all over the world. They were doing great things. And I learned a lot about the industry, did construction monitoring work on large projects, production estimate work. And I saw that a lot of good things were being done in the industry, but there was this major unmet need. It was kind of hard to put my finger on it at the start, but after a while, it really coalesced around this idea of grading. It's like, this is what we need to address. And ultimately, I left Black and Veatch to do that because no one was addressing grading.
And so was there a signal, though, in the work that you were doing at Black and Veatch about terrain?
Yeah, there was. Really good question. The signal was loud and clear. This is back, early 2010s. You'd see I-5 shut down due to dust storms. Some of those were from solar power plants because you grade and then the dust gets lifted up in wind.
Okay.
So the way you combat that is you fill up these massive water trucks. You drive this big water truck over to somewhere it can get water. You fill it up. You drive it back, burning all this diesel. Then you slowly move that water truck through the field, just spraying all this water on the ground. And it goes back and it does it again and just repeats. It's so incredibly wasteful. And you wouldn't have that situation, at least not to that degree.
Yeah.
You just stop grading. So those were key points. And then seeing just the costs involved with grading, it's an expensive endeavor. And no one really wants to engage in it if they can avoid it. I mean, this is something that grading's been around for large civil projects forever.
Sure.
And I mean, can you think of any civil project, any contractor out there says, you know what I want to do? I really want to grade this site. Nobody says that. They want to do the least disturbance possible. And, that's what we should be doing in the solar industry as well. Limit that disturbance as much as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I love about working in the solar industry is it's pretty much very environmentally friendly. And we're also, of course, contributing to the energy transition, which is going to help us step back from the brink of climate chaos, although we have to be careful about that. I won't go on too deep a tangent there, but so, okay, fast forward, you arrive at this concept of a train tracking tracker to reduce the amount of disturbance. That's all well and good. When did you actually put pen to paper and design the Nevados tracker?
Yeah, so I can credit a friend of mine named Brett for pushing me to do this. I was at Black and Veatch. I had this idea, maybe I want to go out and do this thing. I also wanted to celebrate still having both of my legs because my doctor thought she was going to be removing one of them after the accident.
My goodness.
So, yeah, it was rough. It was a rough recovery. I properly took 8 years to recover. I'm still recovering today, really. I was talking with a friend of mine about what am I going to do? How do I do this step? Like, Black and Veatch is great. I love working here, but it's not the direction I want to take my career. I want to start a business. And anyway, a lot of discussions. And finally, he just got sick of it. And he said, look, Yezin, you got to quit. You can't take a sabbatical. You got to quit. If you do it tomorrow, I'll give you a treasure map to a motorcycle hidden in the mountains of northern India. If you don't quit tomorrow, you don't get the map. So I got the map. And that started it. I went on this big trip, 7 months, took a huge amount of time off and just went around the world, did a number of different things from El Camino to Santiago to finding this motorcycle in India. Went to Colombia, bought a motorcycle, rode 5,000 miles around Colombia. And in Colombia, I was hiking up in Los Nevados, Sierra Nevadas. They run all throughout the Americas.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can put my tracker idea up here. And that's where the name came from, Nevados, Los Nevados. And so when I came back, I was focused on that from then on, 2014 on. I was just focused on building and running this business.
Given how serious your injury was, I have to ask, do you still ski?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You got to get back on that horse and ride too.
Nice. I'm glad you did. So, well, that is fascinating, and we will have to talk more about skiing and motorcycling at some point. But I'm so keen to get into the thick of it here with the tracker, and what is it that differentiates Nevados from the plethora of other manufacturers on the market. I mean, granted, there are two gorillas in the room, Nextracker and Array Technologies. I don't know what their market share is, but it's very big. And 9 out of 10 times when I see a site plan, it's one of those two companies. So it is, I would have to say, a bit of a brazen move as well to design and manufacture yet another tracker when there's already half a dozen of well-established tracking manufacturers, in the U.S. market, not to mention the global market. So let's get into it though. When did you really get the company off the ground, and what's the status?
Sure. So I do want to point out, by the way, we are one of those well-established companies now. We are growing and we're strong in this industry. So luckily we have moved our way into that fold. Now the history of the company, I think I'll take you through a little bit of it here. It wasn't a quick success by any means. My mom has this great phrase of, in 5 more years, you'll be an overnight success. And I think we're closing in on the end of that. But to start a business like this isn't easy. If you look at sorry, what's the word I'm looking for here? But the existing players in the industry, they started in a flat land paradigm. Everything's flat. You grade it all flat. We're working in the desert Southwest primarily. And the cost of land, grading associated, it was so small compared to the cost of the solar module. It didn't really come up into consideration. So the software, the engineering, the initial engineering, construction methods, it was all flat land focused. The structures too. So to shift off that, it wasn't an easy lift, especially for a company that didn't have much money. Me, who knew me? Fundraising was very difficult. So it took a long time to build up all the infrastructure and requirements you need to be able to make that transition. I raised first funds through friends and family. We got some government grants, the DOE, California Energy Commission. We would have been dead in the water without those grants. And then we started raising some funding from angel groups, Pasadena Angels, Tech Coast Angels, and then some independents. That's what funded us for 6 years or more, actually. And it was $1.5 million total raised in seed rounds over 3 rounds. Mm-hmm. And then, a handful of millions, $3 million total from government grants. All that money went focused, it was primarily focused on technology development, software to do production estimates on rolling terrain and to operate the trackers on rolling terrain, the developing control systems that we need to operate on rolling terrain, and then the structure. Is a radical departure from how the rest of the industry approaches its structure. You need all those pieces. you can't just do one. You can't just do the structure, because then you're going to have terrible operations of the plant. And since then we found many more software developments, but that we had to create, from engineering efforts to other activities. But it took 6 years to really get through that. Now, we might have sold a little more equipment if Sun Edison hadn't gone out of business. Sun Edison, they were the gorilla, right?
Sure.
And we were partnered with them. They went out of business. Then it was SunPower we partnered with, and they shut down their utility division. And
okay, so wait a second. What year was the company established?
2014. So,
okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit here, but through that period, we were trying to develop and sell projects to these large, these large organizations, Sun Edison, SunPower.
Yeah,
they kept failing, and so our sale potential went away. We were almost out of business until D. Shaw came along, and they were really looking for a tracker that could fit to variable terrain.
Oh, and another U of I alum.
Yeah. So within a few weeks, we had our first contract, small one, test site, and then we followed with a 7 megawatt, 13 megawatt, and then things just took off from there.
Mm-hmm.
So 6 years it took to really get the product, software, controls, and structure where it needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we really accelerated.
And so explain for our listeners the difference between Nevados and the major competitors. Just real plain and simple. What is the difference?
Sure. I'll sum it up real quick. Continuous torque tube versus segmented torque tube. So the competitors use a continuous torque tube. It's bolted together, fastened together, looks like one long piece. And the only way to get it to bend, to follow terrain, is to bend the torque tube and have a bend in it, which is not ideal. Or you use variable foundation heights, which means then people will be working at their chest, then way overhead, then back of their chest, as the equipment stays at the same level, but the land rolls beneath it.
And a continuous torque tube might have 80 modules, or how many modules on a?
Oh, roughly up to 100 modules you can have, 80 to 100 modules.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're the same for the length, we're just kind of fit typical tracker lengths. But by breaking the torque tube up into segments and connecting it with flexible bearings, we all of a sudden can truly follow the natural terrain. And we wrapped up a tremendous amount of IP around that. It is a unique design. No one else has developed that capability into that type of a system before.
So you obviously got the name from the mountain range, the Sierra Nevadas, but you're from the Midwest where we don't have mountains. We are getting lots of solar now, but there are hills. Is the market truly those areas that have lots of terrain, or are you being adopted in more flatland areas like the Midwest as well?
Yeah, so we have a number of projects throughout the Midwest already. We have a lot of moraines in the Midwest, left by the glaciers. It's a sediment, that beautiful topsoil that Canada used to have and that we now have because of the glaciers. That topsoil, where the hills that were left behind, they're rolling hills. They're called moraines. And even though they look pretty flat, you have to account for the rolling nature of that land with a straight torque tube tracker. So even in those areas, yes, there's tremendous value of bringing our equipment in. I mean, to put it a little different way, until Nevados came along, an American football field with a 1-foot rise in the middle to handle rainwater runoff was a problem that had to be accounted for with conventional trackers by using variable post-reveal height.
Yeah.
That thing that looks so flat, it was a problem for conventional equipment. We came along and we changed that. So that even American football field wasn't flat enough at the beginning. Now, people are, different companies are able to handle that a little better now, but that's a walk in the park. You don't even notice it with our equipment. So if you're thinking about a gentle rolling field, it's still a challenge for most trackers. Hours, you don't even notice as you install it. Easy peasy.
Yeah, even a couple of feet over the length of a continuous torque tube is a big deal.
Yes, tremendous amount of work and cost.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more. Yeah. So the Nevados system, if I'm understanding this correctly, it makes, you can have more uniformity in your pile length potentially. The depth that the pile is being driven to, if you're using driven pile or whatever foundation you're using, a ground screw. So there's some standardization there that you may not get in traditional trackers. But when you think of these high level things, you're tracking the terrain, so the energy modeling is more complicated. We want to talk about that. I like to say that, yeah, you make a piece of hardware, but you're probably a software company at your core. What is your differentiator there? But what other high-level things should our listeners know about Nevados?
Yeah, that's the software is key to operating and developing these projects. When we'll dive into the software if you'd like. When you're developing a project on rolling terrain, as you start to go up a slope, the distance, the north-south distance between the foundations has to decrease because the steeper the angle, if you think about two legs of your triangle, the long leg of the triangle begins to shrink. And you have to make that correction. Otherwise, your foundations are going to be too far apart and your torque tube isn't going to be engaged correctly. That's when you're looking at 1,000, 10,000, 30,000, 50,000 foundations on a project. That's a big effort. So you have to get highly accurate topo. You have to go through the engineering design. People have to know what they need to focus on, and you need software tools in place to be able to correct that distance, the north-south distance between the foundations. Mm-hmm. It's called the northing between each of the foundations there.
Okay.
If you don't do it, you're going to have problems. You're going to have torque tubes that are too short. And the software to do that analysis, it took us a little while to get it perfected. We have it perfected now. It took a little, we had a few growing pains along the way, but we have that perfected now. That software is step one. Once you go through that and you can do that analysis, you can also analyze the angle change at each foundation, which is important to select the proper bearing. You get all that equipment and you create your bill of materials to be able to supply that site and tell the installers exactly where each bearing goes. Mm-hmm. That's a massive lift.
Yeah.
The amount of work that goes into creating that software is tremendous. That's just on the design side. Now, when you're operating the site, you need to make sure that those trackers, as they're moving in the morning when the sun is low in the sky, they can't all face the sun or they just shadow the neighbor behind them. So they have to back off. It's called backtracking. And when you're on variable terrain, that gets really difficult. You have to analyze all that shadow fall. So we created software there that develops tilt schedules for each of those rows to eliminate that inter-row shadowing.
Okay.
We also created our own production estimate software, but really, like, what bank is going to say, "Oh yeah, OEM, we're gonna trust your production estimate software for sure"? No, it's difficult to get that bankable and approved. They want to go to independent organizations for things like that. So what we do is we send those tilt schedules over to D&V GL, and they use Solar Farmer to create a bankable bankable report on energy generation for the site. As far as I know, we're the only company that can do all of that work, create the tilt schedules before construction, get it to Solar Farmer to be analyzed, and have that done prior to construction. Other companies can figure out those tilt schedules after the equipment's in the ground. That's not all that helpful to get a really accurate production estimate.
Yeah.
We can do it before.
So is Solar Farmer like PV Syst? Because I'm not familiar with Solar Farmer.
Yeah, somewhat like PV Syst. I'd say that's
Okay.
a pretty good comparison.
Okay. And okay, so you've got a robust way of modeling the energy production, which, that is very important. You have to know how many kWh on average the site's going to produce per year so that you can price the electricity that you're generating and make the deal happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a question. You're breaking up the torque tube into smaller pieces, but you don't have more motors than the other designs, right?
Correct. We don't. It's no more complicated.
Yeah.
In fact, we just got a study back showing that we're tremendously more efficient at install. That study will be, digesting it and getting that put out in a white paper on our website. But we do routinely hear back that the actual install process for our equipment about 25% faster than the next best product on the market. It is fast to install. There's no alignment needed because you're just going from, you have a line, which is your torque tube, and you're going from point A to point B, which are your bearings. You just drop it in place. There's no alignment involved with that. So our system, you just drop all the pieces in place, you tighten the bolts in a certain order, You're aligned. You don't have to use string lines, lasers, none of that. It just auto aligns. Same thing with our modules. There's no alignment process involved with the modules. They just kind of snap fit into place and you tighten bolts. So
you have made some innovation in how the module attaches to the racking?
How you align it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we use there are 400 millimeter spaced holes on the module frames, and we use nubs that go into those holes. So you push the module on, the holes fall around the nubs, you're aligned. Got patents filed on that where we do try to protect our right to operate.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something unique that we put together.
So if I'm a developer casting about for alternatives, this is one of the things that I find so annoying about the industry.
Right, Sal.
They're trying to drive down the cost of energy. And so they're trying to drive down the cost of the installation. And they're trying to use a robust product, but a very affordable product at the same time, right? So what is your experience working with developers and that are driving to LCOE, and how is that playing out for Nevados?
Yeah, really. This is where it all comes down to, right? Like you have to be cost competitive. And just because you're on a difficult rolling terrain project where you might be, cutting out 8-10 cents a grading, doesn't mean you get to put that on top of your equipment price. So we have to be cost competitive on flatland and rolling terrain. So it's really, kind of flatland pricing everywhere. So we don't have a big swing in our pricing if you're going from flatland to rolling terrain. It's pretty much the same darn pricing. It's the same equipment. And we are cost competitive. Even on flatland projects, our equipment is cost competitive. So we don't really have a loss there. But what we do is we help the developers and the EPCs avoid other costs. And by doing that, we bring a lot of land back into consideration that they wouldn't have been able to use before.
Yeah.
And I want to hit on some of this. Like in a lot of the country, you can't grade. So it's not even an option. That 8-10 cents that you might have spent, or 2 cents or whatever on grading, you're just not even allowed to spend it. It's going to be too problematic. There's going to be too many protests at the permit hearings. You just can't grade the sites. So, but even if you do, there's tremendous cost involved. When you come in with our equipment, you just ignore all that and you approach it basically, like a flatland project with regards to land preparation.
Yeah.
And we don't get to charge more. Like I said, we don't get to charge, buckets of money more to do that. We still have to be competitive because it's a solar project that fits within certain parameters, be it flatland project or rolling terrain.
Okay. So,
But Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, my next question is about the customer experience. Like, what is every manufacturer is different, and everybody talks a good game, but the reality is always slightly different, right? So I'm just curious, what is, if I was to go to a Helga Biernath, who I checked has not installed Nevados yet, but is excited to install Nevados this year, he said. But, if I talk to a developer or an installer who's worked with Nevados, what would they say about working with Nevados?
Well, so I'm going to answer that in two parts. The actual interaction of working with Nevados, and then what we help with at the beginning of the project. Because the customer experience we affect long before our equipment even shows up. It's this grading piece. You eliminate grading. You leave the natural terrain in place. You don't have to go through the permits and all the protests that you often see at the trying to get permits to grade these days. The risk mitigation planning, you don't have to do that. The amount of time it takes just to move the soil around. Maybe you're taking all that topsoil and stockpiling it, then doing your grading and then bringing the topsoil back. Incredibly expensive process. That is part of the customer experience. And we're eliminating that risk and those efforts. So long before they touch our equipment, the customer experience is being shaped by that, by eliminating those costs. If you think about grading, as soon as you start moving the dirt, you have these risks you expose, maybe shallow bedrock, or maybe you find something underground that you weren't expecting. It rains and the water doesn't run off, and all of a sudden you have a bucket of mud that you're working in.
Yeah.
All of that gets taken out. If you're dealing with farmland and the farmers don't want that land to be graded, so if you try to do that, you're going to have tremendous resistance from the farmers. And then there are the environmental agencies that you have to work with. They don't want to see any of that grading because you're going to get sediment going into rivers, streams, killing them potentially, choking out ponds and lakes. So the customer experience is shaped at the beginning. And the customers, it's the developer, but it's also the people who use the power around that area. They want, the local constituents, they want to have a good experience as well. So it starts way back at the beginning. I want to give you one example real quick. We have a project in Northern Virginia. It's 175 megawatts. It's built on the most ridiculously rolling terrain that you've ever seen a tracker installed on. No grading. The director of the Department of Environmental Quality came out and was just blown away by the beauty of the site, how well it was put together, and the fact that it had 1/8 the number of retention basins you typically see because you didn't need them, because you didn't grade. And he nominated the site for an award, and we're waiting to see if we get it. I believe we will, or they will, a number of groups involved. But that's part of the customer experience. Do you have any questions around that, or do you want me to move on to the next part?
I think I'm good there. What is the next part?
Sure. So the next part is getting the equipment to site. We don't have just one big contiguous block anymore. Those days are pretty much gone. Maybe some projects here and there, but we usually have what are called, I call them fractured sites. So you have a section here, a section there, and then you're scattered around. It might be 5 miles wide, 10 miles wide, a couple miles tall. And you have to get all this equipment out to those specific areas and get it unloaded in those areas. And if you don't do that, it creates a lot of extra work for the EPC. And it can kill their profit margins. There's probably going to be a change order going to the developer. You need to get the equipment where it's supposed to go and not create extra work. So our supply chain team works very closely with the EPCs to make sure that we're shipping exactly what is needed for exactly those locations, and it's arriving at the proper time. We have little mistakes here and there. Sometimes we have some big mistakes. We send our staff out, we relabel things, we get everything prepped up, we get the equipment there early enough that if there's a mistake, we can get it prepped. And then by the time the work crews get there, you just seamlessly move into the next section of the site. It's something we've gotten a lot of strong feedback on, that we do a very good job of supporting the EPCs.
Yeah, logistics are very important. properly kitting stuff so it's easy to, get from container to field and get in the ground. Very, very important. Mm-hmm. So, well, in our last couple of minutes together, I guess I'm curious what predictions you have for the tracker industry writ large, because there are, a plethora of alternatives emerging. We have systems like 5B, PEG, Earthos, and it's totally apples and oranges, right? But what's in your crystal ball? What is it that keeps you up at night, and what are you guys working on?
We see a lot of differential settlement projects coming in these days. So areas you might have liquefaction and an earthquake. I mean, biggest earthquakes in the U.S. have happened in the middle of the country. 1812, we had that massive quake near New Madrid Fault in Missouri.
Yep.
The Mississippi River backwards for a few minutes and rang church bells in Boston. Massive quakes, right? We also have big quakes around the rest of the country. And you get issues with these large power plants. You might get settling of the land, or you're building on top of an old coal mine that you can't use that land for much of anything else because the tunnels are going to collapse and you get movement on the top. So you can't put roads and houses and bridges or buildings there. We're seeing a lot of that land coming up to be used for solar power plants. And that's an area where Nevados just excels. Like, we can handle that movement so well, way, way outside of our quoted capability for angle change through through the bearings.
Yeah.
We can handle that. We're not going to say it's going to last for 40 years, but you have differential settlement. You have plenty of time to operate the plant, fix those issues, and stay within the warranty. So we're seeing things like that where the industry is moving towards much more challenging land to work with, and you need a really high quality product that can bring value to that land.
The differential settlement piece, that sparked a thought for me. What about brownfield? And you mentioned old coal fields, but what about landfills? Because differential settlement can be a concern there, but also the terrain. You've got these many landfills are mounds, right? So you've got east-west slopes, and then you've got south slopes, and you have to do ballasted. And so I've heard whisperings of a ballasted tracker, but have you had any contact with the brownfield developers?
We don't have a ballasted solution right now. It's something we could look into. I think really those opportunities are relatively slim. They're not all that. There aren't that many applications out there compared to how big the rest of the industry is.
Sure.
Now, it is a large portion of the industry, but it's not one that we're really focused on.
Got it.
Yeah, because you can't penetrate deeply through the cap, or you'll penetrate in the landfill. And
right. No, you got to do ballasted. Okay, so the differential settlement is not a thing with landfills.
Not on landfills. It's in other places, but just a couple other things I think that we're going to see. In the industry, domestic content's growing. The need for that. We'll be at 100% domestic content by the end of the year. That then allows the EPCs to use field labor as domestic content as well. These are some big shifts in the industry. We got ahead of it. We developed out our domestic manufacturing capability, bringing all that manufacturing back to the U.S. We started manufacturing in the U.S. to be competitive with the industry. We had to go overseas. It wasn't something we wanted to do.
Yeah.
That's where our competitors were, and it was lower price. I'm glad to see the IRA is in place. We're able to bring that manufacturing back to the U.S., which is where we've wanted to be all along. But having that domestic content, it's a critical part for the industry to grow. It's a critical part for the country to grow. Outside of that, I would say just making these projects easier to install. Labor is getting more difficult to find. So you need people who can be trained up more quickly on a more simple system. That is our system. It is so simple to know how to put this thing together. The learning curve is short and fast. There's not much to learn to put this equipment together. So, and then that equipment also couples well with the automation systems that we're beginning to see roll out in the industry. So I think there's a lot of change left coming to the industry. how do you get the equipment in the ground? Like how many hands do you have available to do the work? What kind of land you're working with? It's going to be a very different next 10 years than the last 10 for the solar industry. It just is not going to, we're not going to be installing power plants the way we are now in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying, all the good sites are gone. That's not entirely true here in the Midwest yet. It's so early days, but certainly on the coasts, you have to move to more difficult ground.
Absolutely.
So it does resonate that there's an opportunity. Well, I would love to do a part 2, so let's stay in touch. But let's wrap this up. I want to encourage my listeners to check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Give us a rating and a review, please. That is the best way to help others find the show. Besides telling your friends and family about the show, that's the number one way to help us. And we do this for you. I want to thank all my listeners. It's great to be part of the energy transition with you. And how can our listeners find you, Yezin?
They can find us online, nevados.solar. We're pretty easy to locate that way. And if you want to swing by our headquarters in Jack London Square and meet with us, welcome to do that as well. Just shoot us an email and we'll get in touch.
That's in Oakland, California, in case you're wondering. Jack London Square
yes.
is maybe a household name where you're from, but not for the rest of us.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for that.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I want to thank you for doing what you're doing. I love to see the industry grow and evolve. So thank you. And with that, let's grow solar and storage. I'm Tim Montague. Take care. Hey, listeners. This is Tim. I want to give a shout out to all of you. I do this for you twice a week. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us your time. I really appreciate you and what you're all about. You are part and parcel of the energy transition, whether you're an energy professional today or an aspiring energy professional. So thank you. I want to let you know that the Clean Power Hour has launched a listener survey, and it would mean so much to me if you would go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on the About Us link right there on the main navigation. That takes you to the About page, and you'll see a big graphic, Listener Survey. Just click on that graphic, and it takes just a couple of minutes. If you fill out the survey, I will send you a lovely baseball cap with our logo on it. The other thing I want our listeners to know is that this podcast is made possible by corporate sponsors. We have Chin Power Systems, the leading three-phase string inverter manufacturer in North America. So check out CPS America. But we are very actively looking for additional support to make this show work. And you see here our media kit with all the sponsor benefits and statistics about the show. We're dropping 2 episodes a week. We have now over 320,000 downloads on YouTube, and we're getting about 45,000 downloads per month. So this is a great way to bring your brand to our listeners, and our listeners are decision makers in clean energy. This includes project executives, engineers, finance, project management, and many other professionals who are making decisions about and developing, designing, installing, and making possible clean energy projects. So check out cleanpowerhour.com, both our listener survey on the About Us and our media kit, and become a sponsor today. Thank you so much. Let's grow solar and storage. The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chinpowersystems.com to find out more.